I'm Mike McWilliams, producer, engineer, composer, performer, musician. And this channel is for gear and gearheads. I hope you enjoy it. We're going to go live here on the Wednesday Night Hump. Hope you're all doing well. I always start out by saying that it is a great indeed pleasure of mine to have you spend some of your time with me like this. Whether you're watching this live or in the rerun, it's always appreciated. Time is a valuable thing, and you spending a little bit of yours with me is always going to be greatly appreciated. So thank you so much. Just wanted to start with that. Next thing that I want to start with, Scott and Maddie. Hey, how you guys doing? That last live stream was wild. so um, I didn't know that it cut out. It cuts out around 15 minutes. If you go back and watch the replay, it only goes up to the 15-minute mark. I did almost a whole hour. and I noticed that my watchers, the people that were in the stream at the time was just down to it was freezing around 2 or so, which is very low, even for me. And I found that to be very strange. So, but I kept going with it, and it's a shame because I was sitting here talking to the camera and nobody could see it. I have no idea what that was. I really don't. So, sorry about that, guys. Hey, Ben, how you doing? Mr. Watson, how you doing? You're doing well. Just talking about that last live stream. That was some weird YouTube stuff, fellas. So if that happens tonight, or if you even sense that something like that's happening tonight, because I noticed that Three Chords Dave's live stream the night before, uh, I noticed that he was having the same kind of issues. His audio and video were very janky. So I don't know if it's a YouTube thing. I don't know what's up with that. But yeah, I'm doing quite poorly, but I'll make it. What's wrong, Scott? Why are you doing poorly? I understand you had injured yourself a little bit before. I don't know if you never mentioned whether you recovered from that. Yep. Let me know. You but that was weird, guys. That was weird. That was super duper weird. And so, hope that doesn't happen tonight. That would truly suck. I literally did a whole live stream. I did the whole thing. I was playing music. I was playing some of my music. I was talking about things. It was hilarious. But YouTube had completely shut it down. So not so great in the end. But anyway, that's all right. Let me see what's catch up here. Yeah, um, this week I did my usual kind of guitar safari, and I bought some very interesting instruments this week. Um, I bought a very rare Tokai. This Tokai is from 1983 is the first year that they came out with it. So right before they started churning out the Fenders, um, beautiful SG with 57 classics in it. Believe it or not, the original 57 classics that this guitar came with are in it. They brought them over from the States and put them in. So that's kind of exciting. Also, what else did I get? I got Tokai Strat. I got a Super Sounds, another Super Sounds. But this one is from 1979. It's the Brazen Pickin'. It's a really nice model. And I think that's it. I think that's it. Gaming. Hello to you. How you doing? Um, and so I think it's going to be please help you. All right. You have an audience of people watching right now. Why don't you lay it on us? What is this that you need help with? And I'm super reluctant to ask. But any case, so some interesting guitars coming in. Did I go through all those? Yeah, a couple of Tokais. Oh, and one more. Where are you from? Well, I'm sitting here at the Upstairs to the Right Music Studio in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Well, greetings to you from India, Rohan. Good to have you. We always have folks from India. We have folks from all over the world in this live stream. It's always so nice to meet each and every one of you. You're always welcome to the live stream. You keep it civil, keep it nice. Um, you're welcome. Yeah. So, oh, the last one. The last one is a Fender. So I got an ST57, which I've always wanted one of those. I wanted to get one of those in. So it's a 94, I'm gonna say 94, 95 Fender. So just at the, I don't like buying anything older than the early 90s, like 92 or so, but I went up to 95, 94, 95 with this one because ST57s are, well, they're hard to come by, especially at the price I got this one. Needs a little bit of work, but other than that, a nice Fender. So Japanese Fender. So I got a lot of those in, and interestingly enough, and this was segue into tonight's subject. You know, and I've got a split screen thing going here, guys, and I have just come to the conclusion that I am not in love with it. not, not in the least bit. So let me change that and do it like this. I think this is much better if we do it like this. There we go. Awaitos. Hey, bro, how you doing? Welcome to the chat. Thank you so much for tuning in, sir. Yeah, we're going to do it like this, guys. All right. So, one thing that I noticed when I'm doing my guitar safari is that I always check, okay, I'm looking at secondhand dealers in Japan, small shops, and like the equivalent of like, the back page or something like that, equivalents of that for guitars. And as I mentioned before, when I went to the vid, and by the way, guys, I have half edited the vid. By the way, since the live stream didn't go so well, I held off on the Videndal video. I'm purposely holding that off to this Friday. I've got it edited. I have to do a little bit of narration and music on it, but it's almost done. So that'll be coming out. But as I was mentioning, and I'll mention in that video, coming up on my regular content, is that I'm noticing the prices of guitars go down noticeably, and the price of Japanese guitars are going down noticeably as well. This has both good and bad implications for me. It means that I really have to find the rare, rare, rare stuff. And I've got to find it at a certain price point in order to make my margins work. So, but there is a drop in the price of those kind of guitars. And uh, I was thinking about, and I was talking to a few dealers there, obviously, as well, uh, trying to drum up a little business and just getting their impressions on the vintage guitar market in general, the questions that I was asking. And really, everybody is starting to see that across the board, most vintage stuff, and by vintage, a definition of vintage in our case at our table, again, YouTube is cafeteria at high school, and our table is the geeky guitar guys table. And at our table, basically, you're looking at, well, you're looking at 25 years. I'll be nice, and I'll say something that's older than 25 years would be considered to be vintage. Generally, it's considered to be vintage if it's anywhere between 45 to 50 years. But in the guitar market, it seems that the general accepted kind of thing is 25 years or older is vintage. And most of the things that, whether they've, you know, from the 25-year on up, most of those things are highly overinflated. Uh, they dove precipitously in 2008 with the Lehman crash. They climbed back up over again and then got a huge, like in the Fast and the Furious when they hit the nitro button during COVID, the prices of these guitars. And I think there's a general agreement among most guitar players out there right now that these vintage prices on across the board, I'm talking about amps, pedals, guitars, basses, whatever, that falls within that vintage scope, are overinflated. And I think that's very interesting that he's even got to that point because there's a couple of reasons why that is, why it happened, and where it's going. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit tonight while I adjust my screen here. Um, Catch up in the live stream. I'm from Russ. It's a nice country. Yeah, man, nice country. Yes, sir. Good to have you. Come on in from Russia. Awesome. People from India, from Russia, all over the world. Sorry, Ben, I got a recurring corona erosion. My eye condition. I feel like my eyes got open. Oh, sorry to hear that, man. You're having some eye issues. I understand. Um, uh, well, I got my prayers, man, as always, always, and I hope that you recover from that. I've been saying lately that I want to not play guitar so much, you know, but I started to develop arthritis a little bit in my finger. I've noticed here it comes on at night, but well, as we get older, the things that just come up, you never know, and so just take care of yourself. I'm gonna try to take care of my finger here. It's weird. It really, actually, right now, it hurts. That's not a good feeling. Um, oh man, blinking is like being shot twice. I'm sorry. At least you've got a sense of humor about it. Yeah, man. I hope you get what you need to surgery taken care of real soon. I know that's a process. That's a pain having the surgery I had back in January. So trust me, I'm with you on that. When I started playing, people used to talk about vintage guitars like they had magic pixie dust on them. I'm not kidding. So this would be in the early 80s. And nowadays, I am really starting to see, talking to the dealers, seeing things on YouTube and talking to you guys that really the conversation has changed a bit. It's changed a bit. Wait till you hit 60 in your vintage. I know, Brian. 60 is only 2 years away for me, sir. 2 years away, I'll be 60 years old. So, actually, I actually sometimes I feel a little vintage. You can see a little ambering occurring on me. Adam, how you doing? Dealers? Yeah, of course, but these are small dealers that I'm talking about, Adam. I went to the Vinendall Vintage Guitar Show this last Saturday, and I'll have some video on my regular channel coming up on Friday for that. And these are just small dealers, but to have the opportunity to sit down and talk to them and see how they're feeling about it. These aren't, we're not talking about, the guitar centers or whatever in your country you may have. Um, but just small guys, and we're all kind of looking around and we're trying to figure out what the landscape is going forward. But one thing I can reflect on for sure is that vintage guitars certainly are starting to lose their mojo a little bit. And I think I want to talk to you guys tonight a little bit about why I think that is. Doing well, bro. Good to see you, Brian. You're looking good at 58, Mac. That's for sure. Yeah, thank you. I've got a trainer that works with me. It's probably the other. And I think about it, working out with those weights the other day is probably the reason why this finger started hurting as well. That's another thing is that you got to keep a healthy balance between working out and being in shape and screwing. I don't want to use the f bomb, but effing yourself up. There's that kind of balance when you get to this age. Yeah, man, we're all with you, Scott. That does not sound good, sir. I am with you, brother. I hope that you really get better from that. Now, this perception of vintage guitars has shifted, is what I want to talk about specifically tonight. They used to be mystical objects, and now they're kind of even lacking in the pragmatic tool department, to be honest with you. Maddie says, it's true. At 46, I only lift lightweights now. Yeah, I got a guy who's I can't say anything at all. I can't say nothing because he and I are the same age. And this guy is super buff and just, you know, he could take on Muhammad Ali, as we used to say. I I feel so good I could take on the empire. This guy. So I really can't say anything because I've got nowhere to go. I can't fall back on but I'm older, than you, so let up. No, it doesn't work with him. So I guess that's probably the best kind of guy for me to have. You know, they're really starting to be viewed as overpriced collectibles. And pre-internet, information was very limited. Let's go back in time. Back to when I was a kid, when everything was in black and white. There was no color in the world. And everything was in mono. So everything was black and white and mono. There was no stereo, no color. No, I'm not that old, but getting there. But information was really limited, and you had to talk to the dealers. Now, these are the dealers that Adam was kind of putting a question mark there behind that I want to talk about. Because these dealers, these guys, in the from the medium sized mom, well, they're all medium sized, from the mom and pop stores on up to guitars and things, for example, in Memphis. Um, these guys really were the ones who were in control of the narrative. They controlled the narrative because when you walked into their shop and the guy standing there with the long hair, I remember them from the 80s because they all, had the gig at the Guitar Center on Sunset, but they were all trying to get a gig up the street at the Whiskey. So they were all, guys, but, and you talk to those guys and they say something, and including Mark, what's his name, now works for Gibson. I used to deal with him all the time at West LA Music. But they control the narrative, and if they said something, you kind of bought it. Magazines also control the narrative. Remember, you used to buy magazines. I used to. I had a friend. I won't rat him out by saying his name, but every month we went to the mall so that he could get the latest edition of High Times. And I would get Rolling Stone. Kid you not. My friend would get High Times, I get Rolling Stone. There's a little cross correlation there, but used to do that. Used to get magazines, and sometimes we would both flip through Guitar Player magazine or something equivalent, a Guitar World, something like that. Hello, hello to you, Naja. Welcome, Volk. Welcome. Hello. So many people. Nor. Hello. How are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome to all you guys. Kids today would never Scott says, hit their TV to fix it. But in the 80s, that's how we did it. Yeah, you had to knock it on the side. Well, my father would knock us on the side if we hit his. My father had a big TV. He always had a big TV, and that one worked fine. But the one we had was in the playroom or kids' room. It was a little black and white. That one, yeah, we definitely had that, or just the antenna because you couldn't get clear reception. I know none of you guys know anything about that. Magazines were the only way to find out about new gear. That is correct, Michael. And so stories on Clapton's Beano, Les Paul, or Hendrix Strats added myth and desirability to those instruments. What do you do? Well, I'm sitting here talking to you. We have so many folks from India here tonight. Thank you. You're the second person from India tonight. Welcome to you. You're always welcome. I am a producer, an engineer, writer, right now a live streamer. And in the 1970s, vintage from the 90s, I thought about it and I placed it between the 70s and let's say 80, 85 to 88. So basically to 90. And vintage guitars weren't as abundant on the market. Finding one felt like discovering treasure. And I've often thought about that. They were there, but where were they? In other words, maybe they were there all along, but they were called something else. They weren't called vintage guitars. Maybe they were just called secondhand guitars. First thing, it's well known that it's Norm, at Norm's Guitars and Sherman Oaks, who we know that he is the guy who really started the term or the thought vintage guitar. Now, uh, Burst, by the way, and I'll throw this out there in the beginning just by stating because I'll say a few things here tonight. But guitars like the Burst, 58, 59, 59 specifically, and this 1960 Burst, those will always go for big money. The 335s from 59 to 61, 62, those will always go for big money. Those will always increase in value because they've moved from something other than being a vintage guitar to being a collectible, to something that guys who have, FU money can park some of that money into something and they can just brag about it. They may not even be musicians. They may just want to have it, just to say they have it. There's a lot of guys like that. So guitars like that move into the collectible kind of department, 50, 57 Strats, things like that. However, everything else, and I'm going to put a date of 1965 on, and I know that's going to make a lot of people say, "What?" But what about? But honestly, anything post 65, which is interesting, the CBS era for Fender, and really where things started getting kind of janky over at Gibson, is where the term vintage, your guitar may be vintage in term, but it's not collectible. And I think that anything that is not a collectible is going to diminish in value going forward. I just want to throw that out there. Now, the collectors framed the playing collectors, the player collectors, they framed it, and the dealers and the magazines, by the way. So these are everybody's talking up their book, as we used to say. They say it's the only way to get real tone. And that was the mantra for decades. Yeah, that X, Y, and Z guitar sounds great, but if you want to get the real tone, man, you got to get yourself a set of Burst, PAFs, in the 59 Burst, or you got to get yourself those, nice quacky Strat pickups in a 58, 59, 60 Strat. They start. That's the tone. Well, Randy Rhoads played uh, 70, 75 a Gibson, you know, and those things were considered to be the worst constructed and were just complete boats. But he played that. It's a well-known fact. So, the tone thing, we know that now. But a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, that was the modus operandi of the magazines, the dealers, and the players who had the ability to buy and play those. And all those guys have something in common. They have an economic incentive in order to talk those guitars up, whether it's true or not. And there's guys I've played it, quite two 52, 53 Gibson Les Pauls with the P90s. Both of them felt different. Both of them sounded different. I didn't really care for either one, to be honest with you. And that's just the truth of it. I didn't see anything mad. Now they were cool and they felt good. They had a feeling to it. Like I said, they had that gravitas that a vintage instrument will give you. But outside of that, it was nothing special to me. Michael Watson. I grew up in the 60s and 70s and never heard the term vintage guitar. They were just used guitars. Exactly. So they didn't just pop, well, they were hard to find. These are rare to get. They said though because they were there all along. They were just called secondhand guitars, and they were in pawn shops across the nation. And then certain actors got involved and created this market, this industry. Rick J. Smith, welcome. How you doing, Mr. Smith? Hi, Mike. I hope you're doing well. I am doing well. Thank you for asking. I hope you are as well. I guess my timing to show up is really good because you're talking about Les Pauls. Very cool. Yeah, we tend to talk about Les Pauls on occasion here. So probably any time is the right time, is Miller time, or in this case, Les Paul time. Um, is these guys talking up their game? There was no such thing as a vintage guitar. I never really heard that term until the early to mid 90s. I never really heard that term. And I grew up in Los Angeles and I worked in the studio system. So if I didn't hear it, and I'm a guitar player and bass player, by the way, and keyboard player. If I didn't hear that term, and I have people, Mr. Watson here backing that up, it didn't exist. They were secondhand guitars, and they still are. But some of those secondhand guitars. So let's put the vintage term aside for a minute, call them what they are. Some of those secondhand guitars have become collectibles. See how much easier and how much more logical that statement rings when you take the vintage term out? The different thing saying some of those vintage guitars have become collectibles. Well, wait a minute. Is that kind of a misnomer there a little bit? Because if it's vintage, isn't it inherently collectible? No, all vintage things are collectible. But if you say some of those secondhand guitars have become collectible, then of course it sounds more, it rings more true to what the situation is. Smell of old lacquer, finish checking, worn fretboards, those were indicative of those guitars because it really depended upon where it was stored, the temperature, or changing temperatures of where it was stored, X, Y, and Z. And it's funny to me that those things, the smell of old lacquer, which people didn't really like, now it's like sniffing glue. Finish checking, now you're paying Murphy Labs $1 billion to do that, and worn fretboards as well. And from that, they don't make them like they used to also became the second mantra. You know, the tone, and they don't make them like they used to. Those are the two mantras that I could think of that best covers this subject. Um, Michael Watson says, I didn't want to use guitar back then. I wanted a new one. Yeah. Exactly. I didn't walk into the Guitar Center and say, "Hey, what's the oldest guitar I can afford with this money?" No. I was like, "I want a new guitar, you know, fresh out of the box." Rick says, "I agree. I think the term vintage has been tossed around to create more revenue by whoever's selling a used guitar. Just my opinion." Hey, I sell secondhand guitars, and I'm here to tell you that it is indeed true. That's why I speak of the quality of the guitar. I don't get into the vintage aspect of it. I point out the quality aspects. That's my shtick, and that keeps it more real. I spent a few $100 on Guitar Techniques, Q, and Guitar World. Yeah, yeah. Back in the day, I forgot about Q. I forgot about that. Yeah, you went to Barnes and Noble was a store that I went to, at the Fox Hills Mall, which is now like West Side Pavilion or something like that. They've renamed it, but in any case, I would go there and and buy my magazines, and that's how it was, and that's how you learned about things. And yes, indeed, that is how you learned about new gear. And there wasn't a lot of new gear either. Of course, everybody had lines that were coming out, but it is nowhere to the extent that it got to in the last decade. Mike, as a guy who collects as well as plays guitars, I have six vintage guitars. Only one is a 1965 Gretsch double, any model with a ton of Mojo and double, any model with a ton of Mojo and vibe. But my lawsuit guitars from Japan, 7883, are better. Yes. Again, that's why I speak of the quality of the Japanese guitar. See, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you're best to look at what is the best, quality that you can get for that price range. And I have said along, and I will continue to say that the Japanese took their time. There were no Monday through Friday necks. Every neck, you guys know what I mean when I say that. Every neck was a Monday neck. Okay. So, and still is to this day, by the way. So, yeah, I agree with all of that. We had a TV with a broken knob. We had to pull out the button with tweezers to turn it on. No, man, we had to use what do you call that? The monkey grip to turn um, a TV. Back in the day, we used that when the knob came off. So yeah, man, that was universal. Mike, cheers, guitar custom shoe shop. Cheers, guitar crew custom shop equals three times price to chain to my car for a week and repack it for more bread. Yeah, I hear you. Rick, that's right. My quality is the only factor to me that matters. Scott says, Mike, did you ever go to the Pointer Hills Mall, the Twin Pine ones that's in the back, that's Back to the Future? No, um, yes. Uh, Gosh, and I'm trying to remember when. And um, another one too that's featured that's near is near Santa Anita, something out there. I went to all those malls. I went to every major mall from all the way down to San Diego, all the way up to I would say San Diego. I mean Santa Barbara. So between Santa Barbara to San Diego, I went to all the malls at one point because my brother was going to UC San Diego, so I was spending. Sometimes I go up there and visit him. But it's all blur now. The blur of time. That they don't make them like they used to. Mantra is the one that really creams my corn. To be honest with you, because some of them are quite crappy. And it paints a picture that they're all freaking great. The only guitar manufacturers that I can say that I would say all of them were better than average to great would be the made in Japan Tokais and Grecos. I cannot say that about Fenders. I cannot say that about Gibsons. Can't say it. But they'll, or at least they used to, the mantra of they don't make them like they used to was built around that feeling that, yeah, I get this brand new Les Paul, but boy, it's just, there's always that next little tier that's what I've got to have. That's the next sound. That's the next level that's going to take my sound up. And I'm going to be playing Madison Square Gardens now. And that's not true. And I just think it's just nostalgia dressed up as Mojo. If I were to really sum all that up, and so then we got into the internet age, you know, and the transparency effect took effect, if you will. eBay, Reverb, and forums made every guitar visible. Scarcity illusion absolutely collapsed and went out the window. Especially if you go on the Reverb right now, type in Strats, and it'll tell you how many listings for Strats there are. And there are tens of thousands. So that scarcity thing illusion kind of collapsed. Well, you better grab this one now, man, because they only make a few of these, and I don't know if I'm going to get another one in. That's the old sales spiel they used to give you. You know. Doesn't really work anymore. Prices also became trackable. So you can't say, hey man, these are going for like $50 million in Japan, but I'm gonna give you a deal for 10. You can't do that anymore. That doesn't fly. Oh, really, man? These are $50,000 in Japan. It doesn't work anymore. And trends, as a result, are easy to spot. And one of the trends that I said in the beginning that I'm noting with Japanese guitars for various reasons, Terrace being one of them, is that they're starting to go down in price. And because the trends are trackable, that plays across all the different players that I deal with. If one goes down, one doesn't try to hold on. They all shift. The Japanese, man, they keep their prices in line. If one guy goes down, or a group, especially of a big, uh, uh, like Ishibashi or somebody like that starts discounting, then everybody else is going to fall in line. Whereas in the West, you got that guy that's like, damn it, I paid 10 grand for this 82 Squire. Somebody else is going to buy it for me for that much. Plus 10%. YouTube blind test. Modern $500 guitar versus the $5,000 vintage guitar. I've done a few of those tests myself. And what do you find out? That there are minute differences, tiny differences. Like I said, it's a difference between 95% and 100%. And 100, and that is a subjective zone. That 5% is super subjective, so it doesn't really even exist. And so, unless it's just god awful, terrible and cheap, you know, you know, then it's probably going to be equivalent in terms of sound, all things considered, equal, than a modern and a vintage guitar. They're going to just, it's just the way it is. Mike says, my lawsuit collection is 5 most awesome guitars, a 78 EG 700. Yes, I have a 79 EC, a custom, that I have a feeler for right now. The Speedway, nice, 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 nice. 83 Tokai Strat. Yeah, I've got a Tokai Strat from early 80s coming in. You should check that out when it comes in. The 79 Yamaha SD500, nice guitar. and the 83 SG-1000, really nice. I saw one of those. You'll see it in the footage when I put it out at the Vintage Guitar Show, actually. Plus, number two guitars are going to be the same. Yeah, no, about yeah. Plus, no two guitars are going to be the same. Brian says yes, yeah, and again, you get into that subjective territory. I was watching somebody was doing a pedal comparison, and somebody was pointing out that at the end of the day, you could take two players and take that pedal and their pedal board, and even if and switch something on both of those players' pedal board, and then substitute it with something else, that they're going to dial it in to sound like the stuff that whatever took its place before anyway. In other words, that last 5% is super subjective. And now that Epiphone has finally got stop, they've got the distance between the bridge and the bridge pickup, the tailpiece of the bridge pickup, just like you would find on a Gibson going these days, as opposed to what they were doing before. That it did make a difference in the tone. That's why Epiphone sounded a little bit different than Les Paul's. The Epiphone Les Paul, the Gibson Les Paul had a little bit of a tonal difference, even if you put the same pickups in because of that where that bridge pickup is a little lower down. But in any case, now that that's been rectified, you might as well just get yourself, an Epiphone these days and save yourself the money because the sound difference is, pots and caps and pickups all being the same. It's going to sound the same, guys. Each one of them will be a little bit different. The consistency is a thing that people think is great too. It's not. Inconsistency is not a great thing. That inconsistency means that every year again, that's when you get that Monday neck. Guy's fresh in, ready to start work. It's Monday morning, had his coffee and donut. He's ready to go working on those necks. By Friday, you know, he's ready to party. He's not even thinking about what he's doing, and the neck shapes are just different. And so in Japan, again, like I said, a Monday neck was the same as a Friday neck. There was no inconsistencies, and so that's something that I consider to be a plus point. But for some reason, people think that inconsistencies are great. I guess so. If things are I don't know. No, I'm not going to say that. I have a Guitar Speedway's Alembic clone. Yeah, yeah, I'm familiar with that. I have the 700 model. They make a bass as a dead ringer as well. Yeah, they were kicking ass in the 70s and 80s. I got to tell you, they really were. Um, Once dealers could inflate stories, now any story is challenged instantly online. There's always going to be somebody down in the comments section who's going to call you out. And or on a forum who's going to call you out. I got into a pissing contest on the forums there for a little while, and I asked myself, why am I doing this? And then the guy at the end, again, I think I told you guys the story. He had to admit that everything that I said was correct, and so you know. But the point of that is that there is somebody there who's going to call you out, right or wrong. And so the dealers and their little tails kind of go out the window. So the tone thing goes out the window. They don't make them like they used to, goes out the window in this modern age. So when that luster, when that sheen and shine, when that mythos is taken away, you're left with people asking themselves, why would I spend $8,000, $10,000 on a $4,000, $3,000 guitar? You 70 was generally a dumpster fire in terms of quality. Generally so. In Japan, not so much. Again, that's why the Japanese were kicking their asses. Mike says Paul Jacobs with the Hendrix Strat comes to mind. Yep, there you go. There's a great example. Rick says, Mike, I've always been a hardcore Gibson Les Paul fanatic, but about 6 years ago, I bought a new Schecter Eclipse. Nice, nice. It's a 2018. Nice, I think. Anyway, it turns out this is the best playing guitar. Yeah, Schecter's. There's a reason why guys praise the hell out of those guitars. And younger guys like those guitars. You have a better chance, in 30 years from now, God willing, that we're all around, the resale value on that Schecter than you're going to have actually on the Gibsons. Because the younger guys who are moving up, they're going to be older. They're going to want that. It's just the truth of it. Yeah, yeah. The Schecters are an awesome guitar. Um, so the internet stripped away the mystery. And players see guitars as wood, glue, and pickups, not holy relics, especially the younger generation. Especially the younger generation. Scott says, funny how everyone is making more guitars than ever, yet nobody gets on the radio by playing them anymore. It's like they're producing all these guitars, and you have all these YouTube videos talking about, this new guitar is out, and Gibson's put out its new line, but I don't hear it on reflected on the radio. I don't. You know, at most, you'll hear a guitar that'll play a 4 or 8 bar loop, and that's it. You know, and so there's a great question. You know, so it's so strange that we've moved into an era where we have a lot more transparency. However, the guitar is not as relevant as it used to be, which is another contributing factor to why young people are not going to pay friggin' $10,000 for a Strat. They're not going to do it. And therefore, the marketplace dictates the value there. The marketplace gives it, the old Roman two thumbs down, you know, then where are you going to be? The economic reality is cost of living and inflation mean younger players will not drop 30 grand on a 60 Strat or 50 Strat. Many have already turned to affordable imports. And by the way, these are the guitars that they started out with. So they're always going to have, and that it imprints upon you. So Squire, Epiphone, Harley Benton, Firefly, you know, and then they mod those, and then they call it a day. That's the reality. That's what I'm seeing. You know, and it's a pragmatic mindset. I've always spoke of having a pragmatic mindset. Playability and reliability will always trump vibe. Always. Sad but true, Brian says. Really, resale is better than Gibson's. Guess I shouldn't be. Yeah, you wait and see. I'm just saying. I'm just saying because you have to take control of your cognitive dissonance. Just because the sun rose, well, hopefully today doesn't necessarily mean it's going to rise tomorrow. Although Hemingway would say otherwise. But 20 years from now, we don't know what the market's going to be. And these young guys are starting out on Harley Bentons. You'd be shocked if an early Harley Benton ended up being a collectible thing down the line. But don't be, because that's the way these things go. The guitar market is not the same market it was when I was a teenager in the 80s. So I don't expect it to be the same market in, the 2080s. I just, I just don't. Um, gigging musicians are going to ask really simple questions. Will it stay in tune on stage? And can I replace it if it breaks? Vintage guitars are notorious for having tuning issues. Who was that had to change the tuning pegs on their Les Paul? Because was that Pagey? Somebody had to change their Les Paul tuners because everybody's like that damn thing won't stay in tune. Maybe that was Clapton, but in any case, um, they're just not as great as in terms of staying in tune as a modern guitar. That's just a fact, and I defy anybody out there to challenge that logically, not with feelings. And the can I replace if it breaks thing is a really important thing because, or even worse, can I replace it if it gets stolen? Nobody in their right mind, even the guys who have them, am I right, guys, that have them, are going to take their, 60s, guitar to a bar gig. You're not going to do it. What are you going to be grabbing? Not that. Now, this generational shift is what I'm kind of hinting at here. It's a generational shift. Guitars playing guitars are boring, Scott says. A video of raccoon playing theremin will win every time. Chipsons, lol. Yeah, Chipsons, man. Dig that. You know, my feelings on Chipsons are quite clear, but you know, anyway. Yeah, raccoon playing a theremin. I'd like to see that. I wonder if he could do the Star Trek theme, like "Ooh, ooh, ooh." Ooh, ooh. Yeah, man, this generational shift. You know, these younger guys, their parents grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And and maybe they idolize Hendrix or Clapton or Slash or somebody like that, or John Mayer. Today's players are not influenced by these big acts. They're not. Who are they influenced by? Bedroom producers, TikTok guitarists, or genres where gear is less about heritage and more about sound design. And that's going to be a modern thing. 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10. So vintage loses its emotional pull. It loses its appeal. There is no strings to tug on there with the younger market. There's no callback as that you would find in psychology for them to latch onto in order to draw you into making a purchase. So now I don't want to completely say that vintage is crap. And I'd like to wrap this live stream up by pointing out that old wood resonance does matter. I've had enough vintage guitars from the 60s and 70s in here. I've played them in 80s where I know that the older wood, it's dried out, they resonate more. That is a plus point. That is one of the mojos that I talk about. In the case of the made in Japan models that I deal with, of course, the craftsmanship details are there and quite noticeable. And that's in again the rare case that I can use they don't make them like they used to because those were handcrafted guitars. The aesthetics were they were more custom shopped than the custom shops now. the Japanese guitars. Yeah. And an instrument that survived through all sorts of stuff over the last 40 years is something special. And that's something to be appreciated because if you look at a guitar like that, you think, boy, there was some guy who bought this, or maybe if you're old enough, you who bought this, XYZ amount of years ago. I can see they took good care of it. I want to be that next person to take good care of it and give it a life and move it on. Then it becomes special because, it's something, it's not new. You can't say a new guitar is a new adventure. A secondhand guitar is a second lease on life for that guitar and you, but most of the guitar. Some buy for investment. Others are still trying to chase that magic pixie dust. But is it worth it if modern instruments deliver 90% of the experience at 10% of the price? 90% of the experience at 10% of the price. no. Now, I guess you got to make that decision yourself. But these days, all things being equal, that's a serious consideration that you have to make. Tuners is definitely. I have a Harley Benton DC 24T. Rick says, and it's actually a really good guitar. Yeah, I've got a Harley Benton here behind me. The bad thing about it was the tuners were kind of hard to get to turn. Yeah, I changed the tuners on mine, actually twice. Um, but after I did that, I have no tuning problems with that. It's definitely a solid guitar. Yeah, Harley Benns are solid guitars, no doubt about that. I don't like the frets. See, people like those medium jumbo frets, but I'm actually like this. I grew up playing, and I continue to like to play the small, thinner Japanese frets that people hate. Those are the ones that I like to play. But horses for courses. One of my best playing guitars is an '83 Ibanez Roadstar. Always been a great guitar. Okay, I got a video of a cat playing a theremin and raccoons heard it by a flute player. I'm gonna click on that, Scott. Yeah. It really is a cat sitting in front of a theremin. I'm not gonna play that now, but I'm definitely gonna check that out. I've got to see that. That's right up my alley. you know, there's magic in vintage guitars, but you got to be pragmatic and you got to be realistic. And if you had 2 grand to spend, would you rather buy, you know, you can't even get a vintage guitar with 2 grand. I guess you could, maybe some of them, but would you get a vintage guitar or would you get 2 modern ones with an amp and pedals? it's, it's basically the equation in my mind. At least 1 amp, 1 pedal, and 2 guitars you could swing with 2 grand these days easily. So there's that. Vintage guitars carry history and aura, but the internet age has absolutely exposed them as being less magical than once believed. And younger players are reshaping the market with their inherent pragmatism. They're more pragmatic than they don't spend money, as like and I doubt and I doubt that's maybe they get older and there is money to spend. There's that as well, but I don't see that changing. So maybe the question isn't whether vintage guitars have magic, but whether we still care about that magic in 2025 is where I want to leave this off tonight. So those are my thoughts on it. Made in Japan guitars are really good back. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I did. I just bought four. I just bought four vintage 70s the early 80s, and one early 90s made in Japan guitars. They'll be on their way here. Hopefully, they'll ship this weekend, and we shall see them a week from then. But honestly speaking, um, I enjoy handling them, dealing with them, talking about them, and playing them because they are. I don't own any of them. I have two Squires. Interesting enough, my two main guitars right now, and I don't even have one of them. It's the other one is still down at Fern's, but no worries there. Uh, but yeah, I play two Squire, two early 2000 Squires, 2001 and 2003 Squires. But you know what? I like them. I like them. It works for me. You know, one of these days. Oh, we'll see. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you were going to wrap it up. Yeah, I guess this would be a good point to wrap this up, actually, Rick. So you weren't too far off there, sir. Yeah, so this Friday, guys, I will be releasing my video, the Vinendal live. Let's see. Let me see if I can do this. You can see it. Wait a minute. Does that work? Let me see if I can do this. So let me shrink that down. And yeah, you can see it here. I'm in the process of editing it. And so I shall have that done. I just have to add a little bit of music and do a little bit of voiceover on it as I work my way through it. A lot of interesting stuff. I focused in on the guitars that I thought were nice, and I also made it a point to make sure that you can see um, the price point on these as well. I made sure that you can see the prices on these guitars so you too can kind of get a feel for how things are in your neck of the woods when you do a little comparison yourself. So I will finish this up. I'll have this edited and done. Well, I already got it done. I just had to do a few things. So look forward to that coming out Friday. I do appreciate if you guys do watch it when it comes out. Hit the like button, comment on it when you do see it this Friday. And that'll be around noon Central European time. And other than that, guys, have a good one. I will see you this coming up Sunday for the Sunday at Mike's. I want to thank each and every one of you, Scott, Maddie, for moderating. I want to thank Scott. Please take care of yourself. Take care of your eyes. Hope that works out. And all you guys, thank you, every one of you. And our friends from India and Russia, thank you guys for showing up tonight. And I'm going to go to bed. I'm tired. I got about 4 hours of sleep last night. I've been up since 7. So yeah, I can't do these too many of these. But I'm glad to be here tonight. It's well worth it. Keeping my ass awake and doing this with you guys. So I will see you next one. Take care, guys. Bye bye.